I always ask myself, like, if I think, should I say that? I always ask, who does it serve? And if it's serving myself before somebody else, it's kind of a red flag for me.
We're talking about the traits of commonality, but I want to go back to something that is very common. The Jesuits drove this home for me, and, they were approaching it from really a secular direction. And that is that this, being spiritual, it's really about, and we've said this before, about being in the present. Our minds can't be in the future. Our minds can't be in the past and experience spirituality. This is a common for, in fact, all religions have quotes. Maybe those quotes have been misinterpreted as meaning other things, but in effect, they all come down to the absolute need to be present. Master Eckhart, he was a 13th century spiritual teacher. He said, there's no greater obstacle to spirituality than time. So time, the future or the past or monkey mind or whatever, that's an obstacle to attaining spirituality. It's very important you be in the presence. Teresa, you talk about being in the woods. Last time we talked about nature. That was being there because it was so beautiful. It took that to shut down our minds. But that's a common thing through all religions, through all approaches to spirituality.
So good.
Yeah, good point. And everybody has such great ideas and thoughts. The only thing that I would think to add to this list would be cause and effect. Whether you believe you reap what you sow or karma, you need to take responsibility for your actions. You can't control other people, but you can guard your thoughts and your actions.
I hear my mother's words telling me exactly that.
Sounds like you were held accountable a lot, right?
I was held accountable, you betcha.
Sounds like she was doing some very mindful parenting.
Whether she was aware of it or not, she was, indeed. I think we're getting further with where we go. Just my childhood many decades ago, but it was a different world, We're just going at a different pace now. And unfortunately, almost like a centrifuge, I think we're spinning away from the core of how we get to spirituality. And that's why this particular set of podcasts, because I think it's critical. Louis Richmond, he was a philosopher. He said spirituality is really paying attention to what matters. And we've talked about this again. Just another way of saying mindfulness, presence, to what matters. Now, paying attention, I think, is the critical component. We're paying attention to this present. And what matters, well, what matters kind of is defined by the individual. So there we go again. We're all going in different directions.
Yeah, that's so easy to remember and keep in mind and kind of use as a North Star. Like, am I paying attention to what matters in this moment? I love that. And that leads us to tools. How do we cultivate it? Whatever it means for us, what are the specific tools that all of us can use to cultivate the sense of spirituality, that which brings peace? And for me, Roger, that really stands out as a great tool.
I think it ties back to Teresa, to what you asked earlier about the intrinsic and the extrinsic. So we have both types of tools, right? We have the type that we do with our bodies and maybe with other people, and the type of tools we use by ourselves or intrinsically inside of our bodies. One big thing in the world right now, and this is hot and heavy in the world too, is especially in longevity, is maintaining meaning and purpose in our lives. So what tools do we use to do that? What are those things we do where we get lost in the moment and that time illusion of time just goes away?
Mark Twain had a great quote. He says, the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why.
Mm-hmm. I love that quote.
That's great. Yeah.
And I would add a couple things. I think it's a great opportunity as a tool to connect with others and learn from others. So, in other words, be willing to not necessarily change your opinion, but at least understand someone else's. It's good to connect with like-minded people that can help you grow in what you already believe, but it's also great to talk to people who believe differently because it helps us to connect and you might get a new perspective. And then for me, and I know, Sarah, in our discussions, it's important for you as well, we find mentors and teachers that come in and out of our lives miraculously when we seem to need them. And they always also help us connect and develop our spirituality.
Yeah, we're saying we're all connected, and why should we do anything to break those connections?
Exactly. Exactly. And I think the other one that was standing out, which we talked about a little bit earlier, is lead by example.
Yeah, that's excellent points, Danielle. One other thing that came to my mind as you were speaking was living from a place of wonder and curiosity. So as a tool that would be intrinsic, what's your mindset? Some of you may be familiar with Carol Dweck. She wrote a book about the growth mindset and based on her research. And she really talks about, do you have a closed mindset or do you have an open mindset? And she calls that growth mindset. So living from that place of curiosity and questioning and wonder and always being open to being surprised by things.
So good, Sarah. And I would add something that really helps me is asking myself if my spiritual batteries feel recharged. And what have I done lately to recharge those batteries? And for me, that's a sense of feeling restful, feeling peaceful. Of course, that would be different for everybody, but I think it's such a good question. When is the last time you recharged your batteries?
Well, as a matter of fact, as I record this, I'm looking out the window and I'm in Sedona, Arizona. Now, that's a very spiritual place, and that's where I come to get my batteries charged. So, among other things that I do, but it's, as you say, it's different for everybody.
Yeah, and I know we'll talk about this in future episodes about stress, not just reducing stress, but how to identify it in your body. So I know when I am unsettled and not feeling a sense of peace, I actually feel like on my skin, like I'm not quite comfortable in my skin. And that's like my number one sign to get out in nature or to reconnect, that I need to just unplug and meditate or find that spiritual center.
I can relate to that, Danielle. It's kind of a knowing. It's a knowing that something's just not quite sitting right. I live in Denver, Colorado, and I have this beautiful south-facing window. So when you said, Teresa, recharging your batteries, I do that while I sit in the sun and I get what I call my solar charge. So I solar charge in the south light, and I also get my spiritual charge at the same time.
And it's renewable energy. Excellent.
Exactly.
Well, I'm glad we're going to do another episode with Sarah because, this is a topic that's so difficult to wrap your head around. And because, again, it's so different for so many people. So I look forward to that, Sarah. Let's get together again and do this.
Thank you, Roger. I would enjoy that.
Yes, please join us because right after this episode, the next episode, we're going to talk about character strengths. We mentioned several times on this episode about how doing good works and leading by example. And some people may not know where to start. So if we look at our character traits, strengths that we already have, and we're going to talk a little bit about how we can use them. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us. This was my favorite episode. I say this every episode, but this is my favorite episode.
Of course it is, Miss Guru.
You're so great at living in the moment, Danielle. You're just living in the moment, being grateful for what you have right now. And it was my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi. We hope this podcast is a source of inspiration. If you're ready to dive deeper into these concepts and really apply them in your life, join us over at Master Life. You'll have a personalized experience and lots of support to create your own long, bright future. mymasterlife.com. You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.